Hey everyone, RidgeTop here. Welcome back to the AVP Galaxy YouTube channel. Today I have an interview for you with the people at Survios who were kind enough to sit down and chat with me about their upcoming VR game, Alien Rogue Incursion. This was during my recent trip to San Diego Comic-Con, which I had a great time, so if you'd like to see some more of that, be sure to check out our recent social media posts. Apologies for any audio issues you may hear during the interview. We had to rotate with other press at these tables, so there's just some background noise in the room, people talking. But hopefully you can still hear everyone being interviewed okay. I've included the questions from other press just so you can hear the people at Survios talk about their game as much as possible. So without further ado, hope you enjoy the interview.
I'm Tate Mosesian, studio art director on the project.
And I'm Eugene Elkin, and I'm the game director and the lead engineer of the project. So we've been in VR for over a decade now, and we've been in it since the very first days where just moving makes you feel nauseous, and the industry evolved as a whole in terms of what the standard of locomotion is these days. It used to be only teleportation, otherwise it's nauseous. And we figure out there's a certain ramp up in the acceleration and ramp down that actually doesn't make the person nauseous. But we also have comfort options. So if you don't like turning, smooth turn with a joystick, then we have snap turn, where it instantly snaps you. We do vignettes, so if you start moving faster, then there is a post-process effect that kicks in inside the screen that almost gives you binocular vision, almost tunnel vision. And because you're not getting this fast movement in the peripheral vision, then the nausea is decreased. So we are using just standard locomotion, but there's a lot of tricks in the back end that go there to decrease that whole feeling you might get from nausea.
Rumble is always a big thing, the rumble effect in the controller. Now haptic feedback is the big play. Can you talk about how those perhaps work into the game?
Haptics is crucial, especially when you're firing the gun and in VR when you have so much physicality with what you touch. Even opening the doors, it's not hit you in your keyboard, and it should come up and there's a lever that you grab and you pull down and everything should have a feel to it. Because that physical interaction with it is just another dimension in the game that, okay, this is real. It's not just I feel it, I don't just see it in a game. So just about everything has haptics. Obviously the controller's haptics have also improved in the VR, but PSVR actually has had haptics. And in certain moments when I don't want to spoil it for you, I'll just say when you get it and you feel it in your head, that's just another level of immersion that you feel connected to the game.
Is there anything you added to the game that, like Easter egg wise, or just something like where players that are fans of the franchise, while they're playing, you're like, oh, I remember this, from the movie?
Yeah, from a visual standpoint, that I'm saying this a lot today, is we really were interested in being authentic to the 1986 film, and so you're going to see a lot of things in there that will draw you back to that time period, that space. We're not recreating Halley's Hopes, vent by vent, but we are creating worlds that look like they could have been on a neighboring planet. And so you're getting that alien experience. You are going to get to see a lot of the iconic stuff that you would see there, the equipment, the creatures, but you're also going to be immersed in a world that you haven't seen yet, but that is in tune with what you have.
If you're a fan of the franchise, you will definitely be pointing and giggling quite a bit, and if you're a newcomer, you will enjoy it just the same. It's this action horror mix that's just perfectly built for VR, and it's a game from the ground up is built for VR experience.
What was the first concept or technique for the game that immediately excited you when you learned you'd be working on an Alien VR game?
It's the opportunity to work with, I think, one of the most unique AI in gaming. Traditionally, difficulty and the way you play it can be scaled with a biped character, like a humanoid character, because they can shoot, they can rappel, they can lock your arms, they can open through something, they can take cover. There's so much they can do. So we have this creature that's able to climb on anything, walk on anything. You can be on the wall, on the ceiling. You can be perching in this little hole inside the wires. But in the end, all it can do is nail it. And it's this perfect killing organism. And yeah, we need to mix up. Okay, it's an action game. It's not just horror game. You're not just running away from it. You got to fight this thing. So there's a technical challenge because we needed to stay authentic. The first thing, we set a couple ground rules when we started iterating on the game. And one was authentic alien combat and respect the Xeno. So the moment you don't respect it, the moment you your head is not on a swivel and not using a motion tracker to analyze, hey, did I just hear something tap 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 behind the walls? And you don't take out the motion tracker, you're not being careful. You might just get got.
So you're asking an artist how they felt when they found out they were going to work on an aliens project. H.R. Geiger, Ron Cobb, Sid Mead, that's enough right there. And really, they provided the framework, the blueprint, everything we needed to interject into this game. And that was the Bible. That was Red Default.
You mentioned your sources of inspiration for the game. How much freedom did you have in that process? Did just having that franchise idea was really great and say, no, we can't do that? Or did
they were accommodating, and we sort of tried a few things and pushed and pulled in different directions. Ultimately, we just ended up coming back to the Xenomorph Warrior and really held true to that. And so any feedback that came back from Disney was really there to kind of help out. If there was something we missed and they caught, great, thank you. So it wasn't really an adversarial relationship. It was really a collaborative one, because we were all in sync with what we wanted to do with the project. Now, where we were able to branch out a little bit was within the environments, and Disney and 20th Century have been really good about letting us do that as long as we remained in the sort of core visual rules and maintain the aesthetic that it wouldn't be confusing to the player where am I, what world am I in? And we've been constantly getting feedback from people saying, even just dropping into a core game, I knew immediately what game I was playing, I knew what movie it was from, and that was just in an empty corridor. So then we knew we were successful, and then we were giving the IP holder what they wanted to.
Now, you guys have been doing the VR stuff for a long time. Obviously, it was purpose-built for VR. What were some of the challenges or things in particular that were even more difficult with this title than maybe some titles you guys have done in the past as far as VR landscape is concerned?
This is our most narrative-driven game. We learned that with Survios. It's, the previous title we did was Creed, and the narrative is told much simpler. It is, you're in a ring, and you got a train, and there's just a person speaking to you, right? In here, we needed something much more elaborate because the story is much more complex. We've taken such great care of creating this really interesting story that we want to take the person through it. And while you can't really do cutscenes in VR in a traditional sense, because you can't take away control of the camera from the player, because the player needs to be able to rotate their head, and we wanted to yet create some really enticing moments, something disempowers the player and is able to tell the story as what's happening. So there's lots and lots of engineering work and innovation work and prototyping that went in. How can we give you head movement and yet take away control of your arms? And all of a sudden your arms can do something else, but maybe you have a little control of your arms. That way you could be, let's say, strapped to a chair, because that's necessary for that narrative moment.
Yep. And we talked about Xeno traversal. Really, on the art side, the challenge is to create environments that the Xenos can actually traverse, and they're fairly complicated spaces. But luckily, working hand in hand with combat design and engineering, we were able to create those really porous environments with all of the greebles and all of those things, and still have the Xeno be able to traverse all of that stuff, floors, walls, ceilings, traverse within the walls and into vents. And so, we're able to, like, at any given point, they could all drop out of the environment and confront you. You could engage with them. Some of them might run back off up into the ceiling and try to flank you and come back around. But we've been able to, this was the challenge, to create those environments that would allow for that.
That's something we're really proud of, the effect that Tate is describing here. Why are Xenos doing that sometimes? Why did they go away? Sometimes the answer is, I don't know, man. The artists are kind of uncomfortable. He's like, why did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Because one of the concepts that we follow from the very beginning is there's, I like to reference Conway's Game of Life. It's this mathematical kind of puzzle you learn in programming school in like CS 101 or something, where there's a grid, a grid paper that's saying each time a computer generates a dot randomly, and depending on how many dots got generated next to your dot, you either live or you die. And if you run that simulation out, the craziest complex patterns emerge. Sometimes it looks like a spaceship that travels all around the grid. Other times a full city appears and another city appears, and then people travel, these dots will travel too, and they die. So essentially, simple rules can create complex outcomes. And that's what we did with the Xenomorph. Essentially, like, it can't traverse anywhere. It likes to respond to sound. If a player is clumsy and they knock over a bunch of cups off the table, they'll hear it and they'll come. But we're not going to just spawn them right outside a door, like typical in games of responsive enemies. They just pop in from a vent somewhere and they're searching the environment. And they might see, might not see. It might be more than one, it might be three, and they might not catch you, and they might just leave, and you run into it as it was leaving. And that type of simulation, and that creates emergent behavior. Sometimes they do interesting things. I'm like, what is that? I never told him to do that, but he's out there perching, he's hiding, and he's waiting for the player to walk past him. Because that's what the simulation just happened, the way all the rules came together, and that's the behavior it created.
Yeah, it could be unpredictable, and the only thing you really know is that it just wants to kill you.
Yeah, it's real,
and it's gonna find ways. So yeah.
Real quick, obviously fans can be very particular on smooth that shape, that this one's too thin, tail's too long, that sort of thing. You said the 86 film was the basis. Is that the main thing you looked at? And can you talk maybe about the revision of the final look for what your main aliens?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we tried to recreate it as closely as we could. Everything down to the webbed fingers, everything down to the number of ribs. Whether you see the eyes or whether you don't. Surface quality, all of that stuff really sort of was driven by the film and the characters in the film and creatures. So, yeah. I mean, that's really what we were trying to do. I mean, there's creativity in that too, in terms of being able to provide maybe a little bit more. I mean, because the film is a man in a suit, so you at least have to make it look not like a man in a suit. And so that's where we spent a lot of our time on the legs and the feet. Maybe thinning it out a little bit because the man in the suit's a little bit chunky. Xenomorph's a little bit more streamlined. So those areas where we just tried to take the practical effects from the film and work them more into the 3D models.
Yeah.
I know you were saying the story is not told through like cutscenes because the player is locked in this experience, but how is the story told? Is the player like interacting with other characters in the game? Or are they finding logs or stuff like that?
It's all of that. Zula Hendricks arrives on Prudan with her AI companion, Davis 1. So there's a lot of interactions that happen between the two people as they're discovering what really happened on this planet, and they're there to find Zula's friend.
Right.
Who disappeared and kind of went dark. So that's why, and her investigation brings her done. And as Zula and Davis 1 are exploring the environment there and uncovering all the secrets, the conversation between them two and the inner monologue of Zula sometimes is what's telling a story. And while there's not a cutscene in a standard way, there's definitely a VR form of a cutscene that we worked on very hard to develop that can help along the story in an interesting fashion.
And we do to a degree rely on traditional video game tropes. Where you communicate a certain amount of information to the player, things like email messages and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's definitely found, I call them FNO's hard narrative objects where, if you want to get a deeper lore, there's people who can blast through it, but if you're a fan of the franchise, there's a lot for you to find and really figure out and background lore, what really happened to the player. So much care went into a lot of stuff that most people don't even know are in the game. What's the ecosystem of this planet? Why is there salt blowing outside? And it was a failed terraforming attempt. And there's a lot of information discovered if you're interested in the world.
Thanks.
Take 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's time to explore, absolutely.
I like going to Sparta.
There's a lot of very dark space, a lot of dark palettes, spaces. So how do you balance that for the player to kind of see things, but not lose that feeling like there's something in there?
I mean, that was one of our pillars for the art department was lighting in dark spaces, lighting in bright spaces, and then chaos lighting. And in games, it's my philosophy that you don't ever put a player, especially in VR, in a black room. You have to see something. So even in those dark spaces, we see into the shadows. You have to give the player the opportunity to do that. There are a couple of occasions where we provide the player with a flashlight, and we design those spaces specifically around times where we'll need a flashlight. Even in those cases, we want to get a little bit of ambient light into the dark shadows just to give a player boundaries, understanding of sort of where they are actually. So, yeah, I mean, it is a huge tool to use in games in general, but it's also extremely important in different ways in VR.
Imagine
I'm sure game devs love this question, but how long would you say it takes to complete the game?
Jeez, it depends. It takes me about a day and a half of nonstop play. Yeah, it might take him like 4 hours.
As much time as somebody will give us. In the end, it's an age-old saying, nothing is ever complete. It's cut short. We have to figure out our own scope, given the time we know ahead of time, and how much can we actually do. We want to bring it to the utmost quality, so we just make a shorter game. Certain decisions have to be made, or we can only do 2 characters instead of 20 characters because we want to make sure they have highest quality, and we need to build time. We definitely don't want to crunch the team. We want people to have a healthy working environment.
Yeah, I misunderstood your question. I thought you meant how long would it take you to play through the game?
That's kind of why that was my question.
Oh, through the game. I thought you said develop the game. That's what I thought. That's my fault.
Hey, if I could develop the game in a day and a half, I wouldn't be sitting here.
You guys have been in development.
I thought you were just joking. Yeah, that's right. I'll go with it. Yeah, no, the experience is about 8 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, and your typical gameplay, and then if you're a completionist, if you really want to really explore space and get all the background lore that I was talking about, it could just happen.
Yeah, if you're a completionist, it'll go a long way.
Very linear experience, or are there opportunities to branch out and find secret spaces?
There's definitely opportunity to find secret spaces. In terms of designing the game, there's golden path, and then we call it the silver path for people who do want to explore. And that's where you find majority of the lore. When you find the secret emails, what happened in this room. There's secondary stories that can be just told through the environment. What is this dead body in this room? And they're like, oh, that's what this person was doing. That's why they're in here.
Yeah, I mean, it is a narrative game, so to a degree, we do have to draw the player through the world. But we give tons of opportunity to go off on silver paths and
Are you able to talk about the gear, the weapons, and you mentioned the motion grip, you mentioned flashlight. Are you able to discuss some of the other, are there different weapons?
Yeah, we have a shotgun, we have a revolver, and because all of that is in VR, each weapon is incredibly unique, not just in the way you handle it. Each one is drastic in the way, for example, you reload it. A pulse rifle, you have to eject the clip, grab another one, slap it in, rack the pin, and all of that feels really kind of incredible. For the first time, you're holding an actual plasma rifle, and because of the haptics, like we talked about earlier, and its look and its size and the way it behaves, it's kind of a magical experience. It's total wish fulfillment. And then you have a revolver where there's a drum that you can flick like a cowboy. There's a shotgun. Each one has a reason to use the best opportunity. Distance, line of sight, how many around.
Well, I mean, if you've got the shotgun and you spend it, it's a race to load the shotgun. So you got 8 rounds and you got to get them in there, or as many as you can until the Xeno comes bearing down.
And you're physically get to pump the gun. Each one has a physicality to it. But let me go.
And the question is real quick to that point. How do you balance physicality, feel of it, the controls? Sometimes the VR can be a little clunky trying to get your hands back into adjust appropriately. How do you kind of balance that?
I mean, you hit it on a nail there. It's a lot of trial and error and tuning and figure out. Sometimes you have these great ideas and it becomes overly complicated. Yep. And then you want to scale it back, but you still want to have the realism of the weapon. You don't want to abstract too much because there's an ultimate abstraction. It's a button, and the whole thing, your hand comes up and loads it and cocks it, right? there is a whole other way, a simulation of the weapon, and you have to find that happy medium ground where people are enjoying it, but they're not frustrated by it.
I was about to say track 3.
Yeah, and
that.
sometimes it is, you want that because it's, depending on how fast you can reload the weapon is also when should I do it, when I should reload it when there's no xenomorphs around. So that plays into the difficulty of using a weapon. How long is a reload process?
Yeah. Well, and you're also, I mean, you have that sort of frantic search for the weapon you're looking for. Which adds to the tension, which is great. Oh, there's scarcity.
Yeah.
So there is that. You have to. It's not like you have to manage this every second of the game, and we give you cues of sort of how much ammo you have left, and it's all very sort of there in front of you. But we do interject scarcity, and so you do have to be somewhat conservative with how you use your best.
You don't want to spray and pray from it. You will run out of ammo very quickly.
When I read that in our voice, I was like, wow, that is great, because I've gotten to know the character out of the recent books and some of the comics, and I'm like, this is so cool that they're taking a different approach. Here, can you tell me about the preparation for it, the research, and anything in this you're out to tell me about how she fits in?
Ooh, what am I allowed to say?
Prep?
Okay. Well, I will say I read so it's 8 years since she came off the page to now screens, to VR screens. So I read the book, I guess, 5 years ago. I just came across it. So when I saw the casting and I found out that was book, and I saw her name, I said, wait, Zula Hendricks. So I think that's Aliens. And then when I found out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because sci-fi is and horror pretty important in my family. So I'm like, all right, this is very cool. So in terms of preparation, I think the really cool thing about voiceover and voiceover acting is it's a collaborative process. So it's not just me barking with lines. It's me working with the creative teams and the director and the writers to build a world. And so what we did is we built a world based on the 45-year legacy of Alien and bringing this franchise to VR in a way that's never been done before. That's going to really create, I think, some memorable gameplay, some memorable experiences. You're going to see, you're going to hear, you're going to feel, you're going to experience this franchise in a way you never have in the past.
Thank you. How difficult is it in a role where there's so much suspense in horror, but you're the voiceover, so you're not like on the stage or anything? How difficult is it for you to create that?
Yeah. I think what's really cool about voiceover is that your director is your coach, and your creative team, they are part of the people that help you build this world. So they're giving you cues to help you to feel the senses. So whether it's sense memory, whether it's you projecting yourself, imagining yourself in these spaces, I think oftentimes voice acting can be the most difficult kind of acting because you don't have costumes, you don't have scenes, you don't have sets. You have to really go there in your mind. And so for me, it was recalling, reading the book, recalling seeing the Alien franchise through all these years. I wasn't here in the 70s, but going back and looking at the original concept from Ridley Scott and understanding the world, I think I was able to take all that data, input it, and then real-time work with an amazing creative team that's got a high standard of care to bring Zula to life and to bring the world to life that you're going to see shortly, and hopefully that you'll enjoy.
Great.
So
what type of pressure do you guys feel taking on a franchise iconic as Alien, from this 40 years old, multiple movies, multiple books, multiple comic books, multiple video games, just kind of, that task to take on has got to be kind of daunting at first.
I think that taking on any franchise that has longevity, that has a large fan base that's beloved, like you said, there's always a pressure to be authentic. And that was our goal first and foremost. We wanted to be authentic. We wanted to look, feel, sound just like the Alien film franchise. So in VR, it's critical that you immerse the player in the world. So that means the music, the sound effects, the visual effects, the lighting, the voiceover, everything has to come together in a way that feels like you've been dropped right into the film. So that was our first goal, when we did our original proof of concept, we'll say, did it feel like the film? Did it look like the film? Did it sound like the film? And once we unlock that, then we just iterate. We go over and over again. We make more of it. We test different fans. and we get the feedback from the fans and help us dial it in.
So I have a question for you, India. Zula Hendricks has been a significant part of the Alien lore since her introduction in the comic series Alien Defiant in 2016. But this is the first time she's had to be, voiced and acted. Did you look back at any of her previous appearances to prepare you for bringing her alive?
Definitely. I mean, you want to be informed as an actor. You want to be authentic as an actor. You want to make sure that you're staying in line with what's happened in the past. So I did read the book years prior, but I went back right away. Let me refresh. And also went back to watch the films again because I want to say, what did I forget? What are some terms that I forgot or some essence that I forgot? So that my intention, real-time recording, be in line with what we're building. And so I think I've done that. I think.
Absolutely. Just like Sonny was saying, the director plays a big part in that, and we would share out all of Zula's comic books with everyone that's touched the project. We just want people to have context. And when we got into the recording sessions with Andrea, we showed her the game. This is what it looks like. This is what your character's doing. This is what your character's feeling. Trying to provide as much context and backstory in the moment as humanly possible. As we know, she's going to take that and turn it into a performance that feels visceral and real and true to character.
So, with the VR experience, I think the Alien franchise has a really good fit for VR, just like horror in general does. What's your personal experience with VR? Are you having a personal experience with VR yourselves? How does this kind of fit the VR landscape?
Well, I could say unequivocally, Alien was meant to be in VR. The idea of atmosphere, miasma, the interactivity of the world, the fact that you can reach out and touch things, the physicality of it, taking your pulse rifle, popping out a magazine, slapping a new one in, racking it, that sort of thing. That sort of interaction is you only get it in VR. So for us, it was a dream realized, and the fact that the game is purpose built. It's not modded, it's not converted from a different format. It's purpose built for VR. Means we can really dial in how it feels, how it looks, every moment of the game. We could dial in.
So when you hear a new Aliens game coming out, the first thing you think is first-person shooter. Yet this game was announced as action horror. So what drove the decision not to put another shooter in the gaming franchise, and how would you describe action horror?
It was definitely a conscious decision from concept onward that we were going to have a game that is first-person perspective because it's VR, but we wanted to focus on storytelling and bring a rich narrative to the platform. So action horror is what you are doing. That's the genre that it's in. But there's so much story and there's so much in the game loop that is exploration, that is preparation, that is not run and pivot and shoot like a first-person shooter. So it was very important for us to make that distinction so that people, buying the game know what they're purchasing. They know that this is a story-driven adventure played, as Zula Hendricks.
It's cinematic.
It is.
It's cinematic cinematics.
The wonderful thing about it being cinematic, and one of the challenges, quite frankly, is that everything is in first person in VR, and everything's in real time. So when we're telling a story, we can't cut away and go, meanwhile, at the base, this is happening. Because if we do that, we're gonna break the immersion. So everything is happening to you in real time. So all the storytelling is happening in real time, first person. And we've created stories in such a way that it ties into the game loop, and you are assembling the story as you're playing it.
I had a question for you, TQ. When the game was first announced, it was announced as an Aliens game rather than Alien. Now that we know the game is called Alien Rogue Incursion, does the change to an Alien title reflect a change in direction that happened during development?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's Alien is the franchise name. So really we just aligned with how the franchise identifies itself. But the game didn't undergo any sort of changes. We were always going to have Zula Hendricks. We were always going to have multiple Xenomorphs in a space. And it's always going to be first-person perspective, VR, narrative rich. And so the Alien, it's really just a franchise decision.
Anya, how do you get into that like mindset of high pressure, high intensity situation when you're doing your acting and stuff in this scenario? Because I mean, you're in a studio booth and everything, but you got to put your mind into being out in space, one-on-one with the alien. Like, what's the preparation for that?
Nightmares, no joke. I think, without being too serious about it, I come from a military family, and so I think part of my upbringing was understanding discipline, empathy, leadership, being resolved. And also I played professional sports and I was an elite athlete, so this idea of being coached, this idea of mission-based performance, it all ties into military operation, right? And so even though this is a fictional military operation, this is in the future, this is in space, this is something that I do day to day to help achieve things I've done throughout the different iterations of my life. So I think when I get into the booth and the directors on the other side of the glass and TQ and Zoe and the writers and the creatives, I'm ready to go to work. Tell me what to do, what's our mission, to advance the ball, to advance the story, and I'm ready to go to work, and that's how I get myself into that mind frame, which is a little bit different than a lot of actors, but for me, that's what helped to get me in the slot, get me in the bucket.
So there was a brief flirtation with Alien Isolation with when it was being promoted that there were some VR demos and stuff of the escape segment, stuff like that. And I remember hardened gamers were literally like 2 minutes in saying, I can't do this is too much. How do you balance giving people a scare that they're not going to forget between going, this is sensory overload, and this is going to be a challenge for people to take all that stimuli coming out of the VR and still stay into it?
Well, there's a few different layers to the answer. One, Survios was founded as a VR studio. We've been around, this is our 11th year. And our early games were built specifically to take on these challenges in VR, how to cure for nausea, how to prevent, movement in 3D space. So we're very practiced at developing gameplay that doesn't affect the player negatively. But we also play test a lot. So we'll put people in the game and we'll get data from them and feedback that tells us, this feels good, this didn't feel good, and then we'll put in comfort settings that will allow players to play smoothly and without a lot of friction. So you'll see vignettes that come in that blur the boundaries around you, that steady your visuals. So overall, the goal is to keep people comfortable and engaged in the game rather than thinking about, I'm wearing a headset and I feel nauseous.
And I had another question for you, Andia. Tell us a bit about Zula's place in the narrative. Also, is there anything you particularly admire about her?
Definitely that she is not a superhero, but she's heroic in her quest. She's trying to save a comrade who is somewhere, you'll find out, can't tell you that. So she's fighting many battles. She's fighting this battle against Xenomorph, she's fighting a battle against corporate greed, but she's also fighting internal battles. She's also been named in battles, so she's someone who is fully developed, fully realized, and I think for me, I've also lost the question.
Was there anything you admire about her personally?
All of those things. The fact that she's pivoted many times in her life. She's pivoted from being kind of a youth on the fringe. Then she pivoted to being under the discipline of the Marine Corps. And then she pivoted to being someone who's leading by principle. She's fighting the good fight. So I think that idea of pivot, of always moving forward, of always having, being in the trenches, whether it be for the military or for yourself or for your friends, that's what I think resonates most with me, is always moving forward, always keeping your eyes on the prize and always doing the good work.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If I could just add, one of the things that made Zula so appealing to us as a character is that Zula is very aware of what genre she's in. She knows that she's in a horror action sort of scenario. Not in the way that Deadpool knows he's in a game or anything, but she's willingly going into this scenario, and I think that's the thing that makes her just incredibly heroic. That she has made it her personal crusade to prevent xenomorphs from spreading, to stop corporations from exploiting them. And if you go back to the original comics in Defiance, even at the end of her storyline. She's like, we're probably going to die, but we're going to kill some xenomorphs. We're going to fight the good fight, and the fact that she's taken that upon herself is noble.
She's elected to save humanity.
Yes, yes.
We're gonna stop.
Thank you all so much. Enjoy the game. Thank you.
Zula Hendricks made her debut in Aliens Defiance in 2016 and became something of a staple in the expanded universe, appearing in multiple comics and novels, but this is her first appearance in a video game. Was it a challenge to translate her across media to the game?
No, actually, I would say that her characterization, especially inside of Defiance, is pretty solid. It's very easy to understand where she's coming from and what she's interested in. And couple that with the really good pairing between her and Davis, I think there's a lot of dynamite, dramatic possibility. And so I will say that as the comics evolved, they went in a lot of directions that were very much extended universe kind of directions. So for the most part, I would say that we have stuck much more closely to the core lore for the character and the core lore for the series itself. We want people to be ready to interact with the character and enjoy the character without being confused about a bunch of extra stuff that's happened. And we certainly don't want you having to hunt down a bunch of out-of-print comics to be able to play the game.
And that was kind of the question that I was kind of building on the same thing is somebody who's only familiar with the franchise from a movie perspective, how easy is it
Absolutely. I think that the base assumption that we're going with here is that you have watched and enjoyed the films, right? So if you've never read any of the comics and this is your introduction to Hendricks and Zula Hendricks and Davis 1, I think that you will find that they're interesting and fun characters, that you love getting to know them, and that everything about them gets explained in the course of the game that you need to know to play the game. So do not feel daunted at all. These are just these are characters that pre-exist and are really exciting to write.
Interesting. I was very curious. I'm one of those people who always want certain things explained in something's mystery. So, for example, like in Cold Force, absolutely loved it. But that little voice in my head goes, where did they get the samples? Where did they get the samples? You also realize you don't need that to make the story work. That can only bog you down. How do you balance that when you do, especially like a game like this, between how much do I just leave up to their imagination and how much do I lay out there?
I'm really glad that you brought Cold Forge into it, because one of the things about Cold Forge is that the mystery is never actually explained, right? How did they get out? It doesn't actually say that. Is it in the book? Yes, it absolutely is. If you go and you read, there are clues all through the book about how the aliens got out, how they took over the facility. However, that's not the thrust of the story. Very much Alien Rogue Incursion, I worked on that writing in the same way. You don't have to understand exactly what happened, but if you go through the environment with a fine-tooth comb and you look at all the lore that I've put in there, you'll start to see there are a lot of Easter eggs, there is a mystery to solve, and there are people that, you know, have suffered on sight that you'll get to meet as characters sort of inside of that lore. So I think that I hope that answers your question.
So for VR, it's first-person perspective and stuff. So instead of a traditional video game where it's linear and you're watching the action play out, like writing that, is that a different approach going to it?
Absolutely, it's a different approach, because not every moment when you're being hunted by aliens is a good one to have a conversation. You know what I mean? So like when people are crawling through a wet hallway, trying not to be killed, there's not going to be a lot of dialogue, which is interesting because we have characters that have a lot of history together and that have history with the Xenomorph themselves. It's because we know that this is a character who is well known for hunting and fighting Xenomorphs. This is not going to be somebody's maiden voyage with them, right? So that affects how the dialogue plays out. It's almost like she's seen the movies, And so that's really interesting. And as far as the VR nature of it is concerned, the VR nature of it is so immersive that when you try and have a context or a conversation out of context where it doesn't make sense, the players notice, we notice. It's something that we go and police and make sure that everything is as seamless and close to the realistic experience as it possibly can be.
Is this one of those long franchise universes that has, the Bible, so to speak, that has all the lore in it that you have to fact check, or do you have to just rely on your own knowledge of everything?
Well, okay, so that is interesting because there are a lot of conflicts inside of the canon, right? And so one of the things that we tried to do is hew really closely the things that we knew were going to be strong contenders. So nobody gets mad at Alien, nobody gets mad at Aliens, so we know that, right? Alien Defiance, we wanted to make sure that we worked in a lot of that lore, so that all goes in, But as far as like how we work with the extended stuff, we're mostly trying to stick close to the cinematic stuff. We don't want to step on any movies or TV shows. We want to work with the license holder to make sure that they're really happy with everything, so that even though our projects are not related, they can remain as canonical as possible. Now, Adam and I have discussed at length the differences in when and how canon matters, but for this game and for our purposes, I think that is probably the answer you're looking for.
Thank you.
And of course, you're well known for your contributions in Aliens fandom with your books, Cold Forge and Into Cryptus. You mentioned Easter eggs. Are we going to be seeing any Easter eggs from those? And how did overall your work in the book space, how did that, affect how you took on this project?
So, there might be one or two tiny little things. I don't tend to put a lot of references into my own work because it feels a little weird. But I wouldn't say that. What I would say, to answer your other sort of part of the question, though, is that those other two books were really great because they were maiden voyages for me. This is not new to me to write inside of this universe. I know this place pretty well. And the things that I've learned have all come into play moving forward. But the biggest one is to stick as close to the standards that we know and love as possible and experiment with the narrative devices and the meta stories, the things that we care about the people, because changing the lore and trying to come up with our own spin on aliens or whatever isn't going to make anybody happy.
Only goes down to like
right. What's going to make people happy is if we do a great job sticking with the rudiments, but we do it in a way that is groundbreaking and creative, in a way that they can't see coming. That's what we're really looking for. Now, I can't tell you if we did that. You're the fans, you'll have to tell us.
I've curious about the writing process because I don't like to use the term linear, but when you write a book, you don't have to worry about the player doing something stupid and going off into an opposite direction.
That's right.
It changes the storyline. How do you do that and also understand there may be long gaps between when you can resume the narrative, shall we say?
Right. So there's mainline dialogue, and then there's contextual dialogue. I work with a team of narrative designers, Zoe Quinn and John Rayberger, who are really exceptional narrative designers. And what they do, in a lot of ways, if you go to a door that doesn't have a key yet, and that person has to have a, oh no, this is locked kind of line, that's somebody else. I'm not going to be writing that. I'm going to be writing the dramatic moments, the ones where you get the real monologues where you go, oh, now it's time to burn this place to the ground kind of monologues. Yeah. And if you're looking for those moments of empowerment and things like that in this game, they are going to be there. It's an action horror game. There are action moments and there are horror moments, and moments where you feel powerless and moments where you feel very powerful. And so the writing process needed to be engineered to optimize those moments. So I'm always looking for places where we can have those important conversations about the characters' backstories and character development and things like that. Because I believe that when we have those in ways that matter to the players, that the immersion is just off the charts.
Does the writing for a video game experience is different than writing for a reader?
Oh, absolutely.
So did that kind of affect the way you had to approach the dialogue or the storylines?
Oh, 100%. Well, it's just like I was saying earlier, how you can't have a conversation in the middle of a hallway with a bunch of Xeno's like, oh, what were we doing last night? Oh, excuse me a moment. Bang, 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 bang. And so I will say that's the first and the most obvious way. But the other thing is that you have to be really economical with your dialogue, right? If I've been traveling with you for 5 years, I'm not going to be like, hey, Adam, remember when we traveled together for 5 years? That's not going to happen, right? That's called expository dialogue, and it's something that we as writers have to avoid. And there's so much of that, and there's so much backstory that Zula Hendricks and Davis 1 have to explain. And there's so much backstory that Gemini Exoplanet Solutions has that has to be explained. And then at the same time, we still have to, even though we assume you've seen the movies, we still have to put enough explanation of, just in case you bought this game and you've never seen the alien before, we need you to be able to be happy. And I think that we've done a good job of handling all that, but I think that it's a real tightrope to walk. You really don't have very much time to say those kinds of things, because again, if you get 2 seconds to coordinate and you're running out of food and water, you're stuck and there's a bunch of aliens hunting you, you're probably not going to say like, remember that time I got a back injury and the first battle I ever fought? That was wild.
So you mentioned Davis is back. So for fans who are deep into the expanded universe, when in relation to other expanded media does this take place? Pre-Colony War? Or?
Gosh, you're trying to get Wayland Yutani to kill me. I can't say that. I can only say that it's during a time when Zula Hendricks and Davis 1 are active, which is a pretty wide expanse of time. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'd love to tell you. I know the year and everything. But no.
How do you develop moments for a game to do the jump scare moments, the horror moments, so that you can be like, this is where I want the player to really get the adrenaline rush?
Well, what's good about that is that I work with a design lead, so oftentimes they will come to me and they'll say we have a jump scare here and we have a jump scare here. So I'm more. It's like I'm getting the setup.
Okay.
Right. So when you approach this window, you can expect it to hit the glass or something like that. Then what that enables me to do is to go ahead and start throwing in red herrings. I'll have them start talking right before we get one of those jump scares or something like that, just to mess with you, right? So I think that I'm able to do that, but I think that most of the time, those kinds of big moments come from engineers.
Coordinating the story that you're writing and the game you're developing, so they kind of merge together and make a cohesive environment. Obviously, they have plans for one thing, you have ideas for them. How does that work?
It is a deeply collaborative environment where there is no room for divas and rock stars. I had to write lots and lots and lots of drafts to make it work as we gradually aligned towards what they were making. And that's how that always is when you're doing software development. If anybody here is a software developer, we all know that agile software teams change their objectives every sprint. Video game teams, not necessarily that different. They all have different things that they're pursuing on behalf of the license holders and investors. They have different things that they're pursuing as part of the business, what the fans are looking for, that kind of stuff. And I need to be there to support them. And so a lot of my writing, you can't be precious about it. You have to expect to throw stuff away. And when that happens, you can't get your feelings. So it is, in that regard, I would say I've had more work hit the cutting room floor than just about any other project. But that's also because when I write a novel, I plan the novel by myself, and the only person that has to approve it is Disney. So it sort of works out.
Did it ever work the other way during this game? I had this great idea for this scene that would work here, and they're okay, we'll build that into the game, or
all the time, all the time. Where we would be Because the thing is, I still had to make a prediction about how it
Guys
would
have to be wrapped by 3.
I would do very well. I don't know what time it is. Is it 5 minutes from now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of times, what would happen is I would sit down with level design, and we would go through the level painstakingly, step by step. This is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. I would go back and write dialogue around that, and any part where I was like, well, I'm going to have to take a guess at what happens here, I go ahead and take a guess. And there were plenty of times when they said, I really like that, let's make that a feature. Or I really like that, let's make sure it gets into the game. There were other times they said, oh, this is heartbreaking, that's so good, we can't do that. It really just depends. Any other questions that I can answer for you fine folks?
Right, no we're on that. Obviously, games take years to develop, multiple tracks. Did you run into a situation that maybe run like a TV series, pending going back somewhere deep in the process where you have to go back?
Sure. I did not run afoul of that. That has been an issue in previous books that I've worked on. For example, when I started working on Cold Forge, the Prometheus license and the Aliens license were different. So referencing Plagiaris Preptons, the Black Goo, and the Cold Forge actually was off script. They were actually like, I don't know if you're going to get away with that. And then Covenant came out, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, okay, I guess you're good. And so it was kind of, we didn't have any of those, I didn't have any of those issues. This time, I have had them before, but it's always something that's very solvable. I love working with the licensor. They're very easy to deal with. So, and usually I don't deal with a lot of notes. So, look at that nice poster.
This is such a lovely thing.
I don't have one of those.
I was not expecting this.
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.